Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure this morning to welcome our speaker, Bonnie LeRoy. So Bonnie LeRoy got her master's degree in genetic counseling at Sarah Lawrence College in New York, and then moved here shortly after in the early 1980s, where she initiated and has directed a phenomenal genetic counseling program, a master's degree program in genetic counseling, which this year actually doubled its number. And we in the department have benefited actually extremely from this program. Matt Bauer, who works in the molecular diagnostics laboratory, was one of the graduates of this program, I think, in 2001. Some other of our faculty have benefited more personally. Spouse of Dr. Orr came through this program. And these very talented genetic counselors are people that we in the lab speak with on a daily basis throughout the Twin Cities. And even when we go on CAP inspections to other laboratories, it's not infrequent that somebody will come up and say, oh, there's somebody here who wants to talk to you. They went through the genetic counseling program at University of Minnesota. Make sure you say hi to Bonnie, et cetera, et cetera. So, and actually in recognition of this and many other educational efforts that Bonnie has put forth in 2012, she was the recipient of the Outstanding All-University Educational Award for post-baccalaureate education. In addition, Bonnie is a full professor in the Department of Genetics, Cell Biology, and Development. And because of the influence of genetics and genetic counseling and its import in several other areas, she also has joint appointments in the Department of Psychology and also in the law school in the program for law and ethics. Her influence is also national. She's held the position of director of the American Board of Genetic Counseling, and she is currently the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Genetic Counseling. She serves on many, many boards and many consultantships and has input into many symposia and very active research programs. Genomics is becoming a focus of many of those, and currently she has an interdisciplinary program between the University of Minnesota, I think UCSF and Mayo, on the reporting of incidental findings in studies that are undertaken for cancer workups. So that is an area, again, the reporting of incidental findings. That's something that hopefully we'll cover in one of these grand rounds. But today, Bonnie is going to share both her professional objective view of genomics and then also a very personal view, as she has had her genome sequenced at Illumina, and she is going to share those results with us, or at least a certain piece of those results. So I am very pleased that Bonnie has courageously agreed to step up here and present today. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks. Well, thanks for inviting me. So all of that was a really nice introduction. It just means I've been around a long time and I'm old. So there. So I was told I had to have a disclosure slide. I didn't quite know what to put there because although I have no financial disclosures, I'm about to show you my whole genome, so I guess that's a disclosure. So there you go. So I'm a genetic counselor, so we're going to talk about, I want to start by talking about how this whole thing came about and how I decided to do this, and also the influence of what I've learned from working with patients and families on genomics and thinking about this whole new area. And excuse me. And I know I changed the objectives, but there you go. So the inspiration, so I'm going to back up just a little bit and say that, I don't know who this is, and say that I was asked to give a talk at Illumina, and in return for giving that talk at an Understand Your Genome conference, they said, well, you know, we'll sequence your genome. And I thought, yeah, sure, why not? But I had to put this talk together. And I was having a heck of a time because I'm talking to basic science people and people who know a whole hell of a lot more than I do. And I was just really nervous about it, and I couldn't get it together. And I was sitting there, I was getting crabbier and crabbier, and my kid, who is here, this is her gang, and she's 12 and a half. And so she said, well, what's your problem? And I said, I can't get this talk together. And she said, well, I can help you. And I thought, well, why not? Go for it. And she said, well, what's your talk about? And she sits down. And I said, well, it's about genetics. And she said, well, that's easy. And I went, help me. And she said, well, that's like, who am I? It's like everything you are. And I went, wow. I was impressed that she came up with that. It helped a little. It gave me the title of the talk. But it also gave me a chance to have a really, really amazing, it's a little off track, an amazing teachable moment where we had a great talk. As you can see, she's adopted from China, and so we had a really, really nice, this teachable moment, which usually doesn't work. And we had a really nice talk about, you know, who you are and what makes you you and how she saw herself and things like that, and it was lovely. And that was a year ago. And so usually those talks end up with, can I have a cookie? And you don't get very far. So, but she did give me a lot of pause thinking about, I was very cavalier about saying, sure, I'll have my genome sequenced, because this is what the genome looks like to me as somebody who is a science person. It is somebody who understands how it works. It's a database. That's what it is. It's a database. And I thought, well, it'd be really interesting to look at my own database. It's, you know, there you go. And I think that's how people in science look at it. I don't think I'm alone. I think people don't, well, let me go there and show you, excuse me, how I think a lot, I shouldn't say I think, I know a lot of patients and families, people walking down the street look at it. And they can look at it very differently. So in my experience, patients have this crystal ball view of genetics, that you can actually look at the crystal ball and you have a view of what's going to happen to you in the whole future, and it's very predictive. And the patients that come into clinic, they expect that. They expect that the testing will be predictive, and in a way they're sort of sold that too. And I'm going to show you that. And then a lot of people have sort of this very Tupperware view of genetics, where, you know, your mom has genes, your dad has genes, and they're thrown out of the Tupperware bin, and you end up with a kid that's sort of a mix, and that's it. And it's that simple. And there's nothing more complicated about that. But no matter how people look at it, people find this information to be incredibly personal. And it means a lot. So one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about was the view of the words genetic exceptionalism. So genetic exceptionalism is the belief that genetic information or information about our genome is different, inherently different in some way than other medical information. And there are a lot of people in the community, in the medical community and bioethics community, that argue that this is not true, that this genetic information is the same as any other medical information. It's like getting your hemoglobin done, it's like getting an x-ray done. It's really not much different to people. It's medical information. And that may in fact be the way it should be, but that's not how people look at it. And I'm going to show you even some of the things that happened to me when I was very cavalier about, sure, why not? And I'm going to show you what can happen. So I think it's important to keep in mind how people see their genome. And people see it in many different ways, but in a way my daughter was right. It is you. It's your family, it's your identity, it's your children, it's where you came from. It's a unique identifier. You can't change it, and if it's broken, you can't fix it. And if it's broken, it means your family's broken. It's why GINA happened, and that's the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Trying to protect patients, and still in light of the fact that there's a law out there to protect patients, there are still people who choose not to have testing because they're worried about the confidentiality of this information. And I have to tell you, I worried about it after I got it and saw the volume of information that was there. It's why adoptees want to find their parents. Despite the fact that they have a whole history of being raised in one universe, there's this belief that if you find the universe where you came from, that's you. And it's a very hard thing to reconcile. And I was talking to my husband, and I said, this is why people feel obligated to spend like Christmas and holidays with people they don't like, because they're related to them. You know, your genes mean something. You do things for people you would not otherwise talk to, because you're related to them. And that's important to remember. That's incredibly important to remember. So information about the genome can change how you see yourself and how others see you. It can change plans for marriage, children, or career, and it can change your relationships with you and your family. And I've seen that happen in the clinic. And so walking into this, I think that was something that I wanted to try and remember. This is an incredibly powerful quote from Kay Jamison, who is at Hopkins, and she's a psychologist, and she's probably the most, what I want to say, experienced person in the area of genetics and manic depression. And wrote the book An Unquiet Mind, which is a great book. And she tells this story that when she actually went to see a geneticist, she didn't say who, and gave her family history, which is clearly dominant in her family. I mean, there are lots of people who have been diagnosed with manic depression. A lot of people committed suicide in her family. And the physician that saw her said, well, my gosh, I hope you're not thinking about having children. And because and the implications is your genes are so bad, your family's so bad, ooh, you're not going to have children. And that's the quote that came out of this. And I think we need to remember that when we're thinking about testing. Genetics is really, really personal, and that's what I'm hoping this information changes, that people see it more like, this isn't your family, this isn't who you are, this doesn't mean you're broken if something's different. Everybody's got genes that aren't quite the way they should be, and that there are variations in the population, and I think most people do not understand this. And that's going to limit how we use this tool. So the challenge, public education, most people don't know what to do with this information. They don't have a framework to think about it. In order to know what to think, you have to know what to think about, and that's what genetic counseling is all about. The bigger challenge is healthcare, the healthcare provider education. The medical community doesn't understand genome testing and doesn't understand genetics. Of the top 10 game changers last year, game changers, on Medscape, in medicine, and I didn't put this down, in pediatrics, also in cardiology, not one said anything about genetics. Those are the top 10, not one. So that we have a long way to go for this to be integrated into medicine, and that's what this whole thing is all about, is to integrate this into medicine. So just to sort of summarize this part here, the information that we see, and I'm going to show to you, is contextual and it's dynamic. The context matters. When you find variants in the genome that are associated with diabetes, and you have a family full of people who have diabetes, that's different. That means something different than people who don't have a family history with diabetes. And patients have a hard time understanding, people walking down the street. And I'm mixing this up because, again, when I was talking to Betsy about this last night by email, we were emailing back and forth, and the genome sequencing that I had done is not testing for disease, and that's how we're used to looking at testing. We're used to looking at testing to diagnose, trying to figure out what's wrong with somebody. This is the testing that is done on well people so that they can see their genome and use it to figure out if they're at risk for something and hopefully change their health habits, which of course is a whole other story about how difficult it is to get people to do what you want them to do. But nonetheless, so this is genome sequencing for healthy people. And so what the information means changes over, and it changes terrifically over time. It's only as good as the database is, and I'm going to show you that too. So what is a variant that's considered to be benign or unknown now in the genome, as the database grows, can easily become a pathogenic mutation as we learn more. It involves a family, and I'll tell you a little story about that as well. And it's real easy to forget that you're testing your family as well as yourself. For many people, it can be very emotional, it can be very personal. It's not typical medicine. And I think this information will, in fact, become a part of medical care and will change the way we look at things, but the information for many people is often less important than understanding what it means to people. And people need help using this information. So I'm going to flip over to understanding a little and tell you the story about getting my own genome sequence, and I'm going to show it to you, and you can look at it and ask whatever questions you want. It was like drinking from a fire hose. It was pretty impressive that way. So here's the story, is that I was invited to Illumina to give a talk and get my genome sequence like everybody else in this symposium called Understand Your Genome. So there were about 50 people there, and they were from all over the world, and they were mostly, you know, a lot of basic science people, but there were all kinds of people there. And so let me back up just a little. The person who sort of got me involved in this is a basic science person here at the university in genetic cell biology and development. And he's actually a fly genetics person. And he said, you know, we can go see what this is about. This is great, and you give a talk. And I went, yeah, okay. And I said, okay, with the genome, yeah, fine. They mailed me a consent form and a list of conditions I'm going to show you that you have to go through, and it has to be ordered by a physician, and so it has to the requisition form has to have a physician's signature on it, and a tube for blood. And it said, make an appointment with your primary care doctor and get your blood drawn and go through the consent form, and your primary care doctor can order this test. Remember that. So this is one of the first emails I got. It's really kind of fun to find out that what it's, your samples are covering, that I have high quality DNA. That was, I liked seeing that. I didn't quite know if they were just trying to be nice, but nonetheless, I think that just meant they didn't need another blood sample. And so these emails came in pieces, telling you where it was kind of, my husband ordered a Mini Cooper and he watched it, you know, he was getting emails from the Mini Cooper, your car's over here having this done. That's what I sort of felt like. I was sort of getting put together and seeing it on the email. And they were telling me things, and remember, this is supposed to be for anybody who really wants this done and wants this paid for. I have no idea, if you don't really know what ultrasonic sound waves to break DNA apart into fragments the size of 400 base pair fragments would mean to somebody walking down the street, but nonetheless, that's how it came. The testing information, here's the testing information that they sent. Here's what they looked for and what they looked at. Your genome is expected to differ from the reference genome, which is another story. Remind me to tell you about the reference genome. And it tells you how much it differs, plus or minus 117. Like what? You know, if you were not in this, you wouldn't know what that meant. And now they have to interpret the genome. Here's something this is when they write and say, by the way, do you want to blind anything on the list? Is there something you don't want to know? I'll tell you that too. And there's the last one. So let's see what I've got here. I want to go through the consenting process and show you what that looked like. So I'm going to switch over to a different document. And I think my screen, yeah. Okay, so with the consent and the tube of blood came an 80-page list. This is 80 pages. I'm not going to show you 80 pages. 80 pages. And what they do is they look at normal, they call everything a variant. Everything that's different from the reference genome a variant. They call the variants, and I'm still not sure how they decide which ones to say, we don't even care about those. I'm not sure how they know that. Because they also have a list of variants that they fit in the unknown category. So what's the difference between an unknown variant that you're reporting and an unknown variant that you're not reporting? I'm not clear on yet. And these variants are mapped to 1,600 known conditions. And they're mapped, if they've ever been reported anywhere as being associated with a certain condition, they've mapped them there. You can see the limitations of this database, and you can see how this database will grow over time. So I was supposed to go through this 80 pages here. I'm on page 4 or something like that. I'm still in the A's. And there you go. And I was supposed to stem up my primary care doctor and go through this whole list of conditions. And my primary care doctor was supposed to go, now this is the, I mean, I was supposed to what? Take up a whole day of his time? I don't know. because this is 80 pages and all the types of Charcot-Marie tooth, which, by the way, I'd already know I had, but nonetheless. And so if you really didn't know anything, this would be difficult to do. I quickly went through the list, and of course, me being me, I did not make an appointment with my primary care doctor. I went through the list and filled out the requisition form, and then went down to see Dick King and said, sign this. And he did. and he did, you know. And the researcher that I was working with, I did the same thing to him. I'm like, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to make an appointment with our doctor because your doctor won't know how to do this. And so I went through the list rather quickly, and I'm like, yeah, I'd already have it. I'd be dead. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. And I quickly went through. And there was one condition that I, right at the top of my list of crappy diseases of the century, is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And I know that the association between any variant that they would find in ALS is probably really weak. But I didn't even want to think about it. I spent a lot of time working in the neurology clinic, and I went, I don't even want someone telling me I got a 2% chance over the general population of getting this. I don't want to think about this disease. I don't like it. And so I was talking to the researcher, and for some reason I'm again lost my mind, and I wasn't looking at him like I was his genetic counselor. And so, you know, I looked over at him and I went, are you going to blind anything? And he said, well, I don't know what to do. And I thought, oh God, yeah, of course you wouldn't. So we went through the list, and I said, I'm blinding ALS because I think it's a really bad disease. I just don't want to think about it, but you don't have to. And he said, well, I'll blind it too. And I went, okay, fine. And then I looked at him and I went, you know, you have a biological child, and I don't. What are you going to do if you find something with your child? And he said, oh. And I thought, well, you know, oh my gosh, here's somebody who does genetics in the lab. Now it's with flies, but you know, when the mom fly and the dad fly give the baby fly genes, it's the same. I mean, so I thought he had thought about it, and I don't know why he hadn't thought about it, but I said, you know, we really do have to talk about, you could find something that means something, and it means something to your daughter, and you might want to think about it. Of course, his reaction's like many, many patients. He said, well, I just won't tell her. That's not going to work. It never works. We need to talk about other things in this list you wouldn't want to talk to her about, and what would those be? And we ended up having a really nice conversation, but I just, of course, made the assumption, oh, we've got a science person here, it's a genetics person. He's thought about all this, and he hadn't, and it brings me back to people don't, it's kind of odd to say, people don't equate genetics with passing your genes on to kids. It sounds crazy, but it's true. So I've had many, many patients where the light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, this means my kids could have this. Yeah. Or the people who assume that all the genes they have all go to their kids or whatever. And the idea that people, in fact, can keep family secrets, which you can't, or you can and it doesn't work well. So all of those things are conversations that are so important to have ahead of time. So anyway, I went through the list, and the one thing I want you to remember is I blinded one thing, and that was ALS, and there we go. And I'm going to set up the iPad and show it to you if I can figure out how to get out of this thing. It's not. So, yeah, no, it's not. So we went to the conference, and yeah, I don't know. We went to the conference, and the whole first day of the conference was background information about about the testing technology and what they do, and watch the coffee, and just it was sort of just a setup for us. To see, a lot of it was sort of a sales pitch, but there were some really nice speakers in cardiology that talked about the utility of this in people who are at risk for heart disease, and Howard Jacob came from Medical College of Wisconsin, where they have a program where they're sequencing every patient that walks into the hospital to get a handle on it. And so the the CEO of Illumina was talking about, you know, how eventually you're going to have an app on your phone, and it's going to have your genome on that app, and it's not going to be long from now. And I thought, well, yeah, lots of us thought that. And at the end of the day, they had a nice dinner for us, and they said when you go back to your hotel room, there's going to be an iPad on your bed, which meant they got into our room and knew who was in my room. Talk about privacy. And they wouldn't let us get into the iPad. They said it's locked and you can't get in. Somebody actually managed to hack into it overnight. And they said when you bring it back in the morning, and we'll show you how to get into it, and we'll walk through it with you. So here's the app. Right here, and they're out in California, so they have access to all these IT people. So this really looks really amazingly swift. Again, what I want to talk about now is the utility of this, which is limited, and yeah, I'll stop there for a second. So before we went there, they mailed us a report. Actually, they mailed it to Dick, and Dick's like, here. I'm not looking at it, but well, you can. But they mailed us a report with our pathogenic variants, otherwise known as mutations. And so I'm going to show you that here. Okay, here. So I thought it was funny because for 20 years I've said to patients, everybody has 3 to 5 genes that just don't work the way they should, and when 2 people have the same genes don't work, they get together and pass on to the kid. And I'm like, I have 4 genes. And so I'm right in the middle of recessive conditions. I'm a carrier for biotinidase deficiency. I'm a carrier for PKU. I have an abnormal gene in what I think is a collection of genes for myoadenylate deaminase deficiency and Joubert syndrome. So the truth about those conditions is that if I were 20 years old and thinking about having kids, I'd have my husband tested for those things, and if we were both carriers, we would think about what we wanted to do about that as far as having children. But they're recessive conditions, and so I don't care. I'm going to show you the report that would have gone to my primary care physician, and that's, you're going to see that's an issue. And then there's this. On the pathogenic mutation side of things. And I have to tell you, I opened that up and looked at it and went, crap. I didn't see that on that 80-page list. How did I miss that? Oh my God. And of course, you know, I know what it is, but I quickly looked it up, and whenever you see spongiform encephalopathy, it's bad. That can't be good. And so that actually was not, that freaked me out. There's a lot of data here. So here's how they set it up, and I'm going to show you how they set up it's really an amazing setup. And so they give you some background on prion diseases, and it looks bad. And this is the SNP that is the abnormality. And it's located on chromosome 20. Here's the variant base. And I was sitting there staring at this, thinking, oh my God, this is bad. This is really bad. My husband is standing behind me, and I mean, I lost blood pressure. I was like, whew. And he said, Bonnie, look at this. Yeah. Everyone's not walking around with mad cow disease, really. And I went, oh yeah, okay, you're right. You're right. This can't be what I think it is. But I'll show you the report, and I'll show you what it took me to figure out. I took this SNP and put it into Google Scholar, and the 5 papers came up. And then I also went into Gene Reviews, and the papers associated with this came up. For those of you who want to know what this is, because it took me a while to figure out, what this is this is a variant in a part of the gene downstream of where the mutation, an insertional mutation that usually happens, that causes either Creutzfeldt-Jakob or familial fatal insomnia. And what it is, it's a modifier part of the protein such that if you have the mutation that causes the disease, this one in particular causes the disease to come on faster, younger age of onset, and you die faster, which I guess is a good thing. But I just looked at my husband and went, well, I wouldn't be around long. That's good. And if you actually have, so I've got, I think I've got 2 valines, I think. And if you are homozygous for methionine, you have an older age of onset with a much slower progression of the disease. So it's a modifier. It took me a long time to figure that out. It was not easy to figure out. And here is the report. Here's the only thing that's on the report. This is the report that would have gone back to my primary care doctor about this disease. One of the first clues is this is here when this is here. Yeah, it is. Well, what the heck is this going? And that's because this is the killer. And so, yeah, again, it took me a while to figure out. Well, wait, I'm homozygous for a valine at this position in the protein, and that's a modifier part of the protein. So it took me a long time to figure it out. They really don't. This is all you would know. If you didn't know this, and you didn't know to pull the papers, and they're basic science papers, if you didn't know to pull them, you might be telling somebody that, you know, they will end up with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or familial fatal insomnia. That was really kind of scary. So the other funny part of this is while I'm at this meeting, sitting there with I went to the meeting knowing this, and I'm sitting there with my iPad, and the guy sitting next to me is a microbiologist from Surrey, England, and we were talking about Downton Abbey, and and they're really into it too. And he said, "Are you a genetic counselor?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you know anything about prion diseases?" And I went, "Okay." He said, "I've got this," and I went, "Okay, I do too." And then I'm standing in line because they took us through the labs, and some other woman comes up to me and she said, "You're a genetic counselor." She said, "I've got this prion protein." I'm like, "Oh, for God's sake." 5 people in the audience. There were 50 people, and 5 had this. So I actually went up to the person who I knew wrote all these reports and said, "This is not right." She said, "Oh my God, no, it's not." So that's scary. That's scary that you can have something this bad be that wrong and be that misleading. It's also scary that even knowing what I knew, I went through 80 pages, I missed this. I didn't see this. I don't know why I didn't see it, but I didn't. I was quickly going through the pages and I didn't see it. So that's kind of scary. Let me show you what this whole thing does. There's a lot of data on here, so it takes a minute. Okay. So the way they've got this organized is this is a big wheel, and I have not figured out how to efficiently go from one side of the wheel to the other without going through the whole wheel. But I've learned how to at least search it, but how to quickly get from one end to the other. So they've got the variants that are associated with, for me, the ones in the red balls are the ones that are clinically significant variants that are called pathogenic, otherwise known as mutations. So I have mutations in genes that are associated with these diseases. Then there's a whole list of things where they look at variants that they know are associated with these diseases, but I didn't have any. And you can go through that whole list, but we're not going to. I mean, I'm happy to look anything up. And then there's the unknown list, and then this is the easiest way for me to get through. There. Okay. And then there's the associated list. So in other words, I have variants that are associated with that disease, but not highly associated. So this is a 20-fold increase, except this isn't the typical type of glaucoma. This is exfoliating glaucoma, which I really know nothing about. And I guess I should talk to my eye doctor about this. But nonetheless, again, a 20-fold increase. If the incidence is 1 in a million, who cares? If the incidence is 1 in 10, that makes a big difference. And I just don't know right now whether that does or that doesn't. And so so there's volumes of information here, most of which is very difficult to figure out what to do with. And there. And they do things like hair color. they were wrong about my hair color, but my hair color's never been the same color for very long anyway. And you can see what they've done. And you can, and a lot of this looks kind of crazy, in a way it sort of is, but what they're just starting to do is they're starting to build a database of what they know and then relate it back. And so I'm going to do one more thing and then I'll show you and then let you ask questions here. But okay. So they actually test for some personality traits, which in a way it makes sense. Personality traits, underlying personality, and in fact has a very strong genetic basis, and we all know that. You can breed for it in dogs, so why would we be any different? And so I looked at this and went, oh, this is going to be funny. And the top one shows that I have an allele that's associated with it. Again, my husband's looking at that going, yeah, no kidding. But I can counteract it. So I have no idea what this means. I mean, at the moment, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really tell you anything. But they've looked at other personality traits on here too. They're looking at alcoholism, depression, and they've got reactions to or ability to metabolize and use certain medications. That's probably the most useful information on here, along with some heart disease. This was done. Let me see. There. No, that's not what I wanted. There. This was done before the Supreme Court ruling on gene patents, and of course it has to do with the technology in that if you're doing next generation sequencing, the patents don't apply because the patents are based on the claim that the gene is isolated from the body and it's different. But if you're reading down the genome, you're not isolating the gene, which is how they got around the patent. And so they did do BRCA2. There is BRCA1, but there's nothing there. There was nothing there for BRCA. There's something they must have wanted to report. Yeah, back. That there was a variant. I think there was a variant that is not associated or doesn't cause the disease. So you can see how and there's 1,600 diseases in that wheel, or traits or whatever in that wheel. This is the other cool thing. Betsy will like this. And if you look at them, this is the technology. They sort of move. It's kind of cool. Anyway, not that matters. Here's chromosome 20. Here's where the prion protein is. You can move. It'll tell you what has been mapped to that chromosome. So they've done an amazing amount of work. They've done a lot of work. And they've got a load of genetic counselors out there scouring every database they can get their hands on, trying to find, is this variant ever been reported anywhere to be associated with disease, and what disease is it, and how strong is it? Is it a report with one person? Is it a case study? Is it in a database somewhere? And trying to figure out what to report out and what not to report out. But again, from the very beginning, they had more variants than they knew what to do with, and they threw some out. I don't know how they made that decision, and I'm guessing in 5 years some of those might mean something, but I don't know. So their database right now, their information, the way you can use this information is limited to what's in that database or what other database they can manage to get to. There are a lot of databases out there that you can't get to. 23andMe has a huge database. I don't know how good it is, but they've got a huge database, but obviously they're not going to share it because that's their business. So there's a lot of people collecting data about looking at variations in the genome and what you tell about how, what your health is like. That would be the power of doing it on patients that check into the hospital, because you would amass a genome, a database much more useful, because it would be tied to medical records, and you would know what people have. So I am going to stop there. I think Betsy wanted to tell you a few things too, and if anybody wants me to look anything up, I'm happy to. Come on.
Maybe you should do it while it's up so that people
Yeah.
could ask before you have to disconnect.
Yeah, no. Does anybody have any questions about this or the experience or anything? It was a lot of fun. And it was very fun because I'm sitting in a room full of people who, you know, do this in many cases. I was really impressed with the lab. I started off life in the lab, but I've been in the lab for a long time. I was incredibly impressed with the technology in the lab. And there were people like, yeah, we got that. And so they, you know, they did this, and they were still sitting there with their genome going, look at this, or I have this. No, you're fine.
So, your example with, you know, were this to go back to the primary care doctor or started with them is a terrific one. I mean, if you go back to OBGYNs trying to understand what CF mutations are or whatever, I mean, they can't even grasp that. So, how has the company dealt with that fact and the reality of the information overload and inability to have the processors to understand that information, and what role does that present for you or pathologists or other people to get in between that and have a beneficial effect?
Great question. If you didn't hear the question, the question is, you know, there's a ton of information here. A lot of it is not written in such a way that a primary care doctor would understand to be able to communicate that to a patient. Patients surely are not going to understand it. And what is the company doing about that? And the deal is they're putting this information out there, and then they turn to people like me and you and say, well, what are you going to do about this? And so the truth is the information, our ability to amass this information has happened so fast that the medical community has not had a chance to keep up at all. What they are trying to do, and what a couple of places have done, is have integrated courses into the medical school curriculum where the medical students actually have part of their genome sequence and they can see what it looks like. And they can understand how to, you know, how to look up the variants, what it means, what you can tell, what you can't tell, how things are going to change over time. Because of course the ultimate goal is that you would sequence people once and they'd have that database and you wouldn't have to sequence them again, but you'd query the database again when you learn something new about a variant. And so again, what it means would change over time. And so Mount Sinai in New York is starting off with a course, and they just started, one of the genetic counselors that teaches the course, we were talking about that, and they just started last year, and Stanford has a course that they're working on to sort of get everybody up to speed to see what this really, really looks like. And so what do we do in the clinic right here, right now? I don't have a good answer for you. There's about 3,000 genetic counselors in the country, so this is going to be fun. And the National Society of Genetic Counselors has looked at this and said, we need to increase the workforce. We need to start producing more genetic counselors. This is going to take off, and it's going to take off in the next 5 years, and it's going to make a difference. It's not going to. I don't think all of medicine is going to be turned on its head in 3 years or anything like that. But it's coming, and people are going to understand a whole lot more, know a whole lot more than we know what to do with. And so I think it is a big problem.
Well, I'm sure it may be useful in the future, but I think at this point, with the SNAS interface and the Shop Now button and the iPads, it just looks like an attempt to sell you something.
Yes, I agree with you. They're in California. They got all these people that have IT stuff and can do this and make it look really cool. By the same token, it's the same technology that makes a lot of things accessible to everyday people. I mean, one thing you can say about the iPhone is you can be really dumb with technology, and I am, and you can use it. And so this is part of it. This is part of not only having everybody having their genome sequence, but having it accessible to them, so it's not something that is very scary and not usable. So that's actually part of the deal. But I agree with you. They're on the bandwagon, and a lot of and I'm not saying that being crabby about it. I actually think they're well intentioned, that they have figured out this could change how people look at their medical care. It could change how people look at what they do with their lives, as far as, you know, if I've got a really greatly increased risk of diabetes, maybe I'll do something about that rather than get diabetes or heart disease or cancer. One thing about genes and cancer is it's one of the few times when you find a mutation and you go, good, I can do something about it. I don't have to get cancer or breast cancer. I don't have to sit there and just die like other people in my family who have cancer. So yeah, Harry.
So Bonnie, if you go back to the opening page, what's in the shopping basket?
Oh, what's in the shopping basket?
What's in the order now?
Okay.
T-shirt or something?
Oh, I gotta hook up to the internet. Sorry.
You can just.
It's ordering the test. If come on.
Is it Amazon
Oh.
shopping? That's good.
There. So I mean, if you go to, it's basically their website. You know, so if you go to their website, and it'll tell. I am hooked up to the internet. Well, if you want me to go back.
Gina, what else do you want to order?
Oh, they do directed testing for diseases. So if you have a child, actually Betsy can tell you about that. So she looked. Do you want your slides?
I just was going to put up very quickly, probably in response to questions that came up. This is so much more.
Does anybody want to look at anything else? I'm happy to look anything up on my own genome. Yes.
Do they include ApoE?
That's a great question. So I quickly looked through that. I'm like, and it's not there. And I'm like, why is it not there? And they gave me this incredibly complicated answer that made no sense. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's why you didn't include that. And they said, well, it's really hard to. I'm like, no, it's not. And so I am unclear, but they also gave me, and if anybody wants to play with it, they're welcome to, they gave me a hard drive with the raw data. And they tell me it's in there. I can't get into it because it's so big, I can't figure out how to get it. They'll tell you how to get into it, but it's in with the raw data, and the reason that they gave me made no sense. I'm not understanding why it's not on my report.
Because 23andMe does include ApoE.
Yes, they do.
And I think it's very wrong. People are
I agree.
ordering that test for like ancestry purposes.
I agree.
And then they get this report back saying,
Yeah, I
you're an
agree.
E4
E4,
homozygote
yeah.
at increased risk for Alzheimer's. And people are freaked out about it.
Well, there was actually a very recent, I actually don't know where it was published. So there was a reporter in New York who thought, oh, you know, this is really interesting technology. I have a child who's adopted, which, you know, one of the big utility for this information may in fact be for people who are adopted who really have no access to family history. Family history is a very powerful piece of information. The best way for me right now to tell people what their risk is for common diseases is their family history. But if you don't have a family history, so she thought, well, I'll test my child. And so she writes this story about her child watching TV and watching Elmo, kid's 5, and swabbing the kid's cheek out and mailing it into 23andMe. And the kid came back E4, E4. So she called her husband and she said, our kid's got Alzheimer's disease. and then so she actually relates this whole story through a publication, and I forget who she writes for, where she talks about how finally one of her friends who's a scientist said the best thing you can do is take that report and burn it and forget you ever did it. Because really you're getting misinformation. People tend to be binary. If something's above 50%, it will happen. If it's below 50%, it won't. Or whatever happened the last time, that's what they use. And so she saw that they had given her, according to the paper, like over a 50% risk for having Alzheimer's disease. And for her that was, their kid's going to get Alzheimer's disease. And to test a kid is a problem, and to make that assumption is another problem now.
And they make mistakes in the lab results,
Yes,
as I
they
can
do.
attest from personal experience.
Yeah, well, yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
I was just curious, does a lawyer ask to get your clinical over like so that they can improve their?
They haven't. I haven't gotten the. I'm hoping. So they ask if we could be. They ask you to sign a consent to be a part of that database, and I said yes because again, this is useful. This is useless without the database. And they do ask you a very detailed family history. And you know who has what and what you have and whatever. The thing I always have a problem with is having taken family histories in the clinic for a long time. People are horrible historians, I mean, especially with cancer. People, oh yeah, my aunt died of cancer, and you get the medical records and she had an ovarian cyst. And she died of a heart attack. You know, I mean, oh, and I'm no better. And so people are, so if you're basing this off of people reporting, that's the other problem with the database. But, and that's the power of getting actual patients out of this database.
So we spent an evening, I have to say, it was amazing. I couldn't really let go of this iPad thing. The graphics were so incredible, and how easy it was to maneuver through and to click on everything and get through. But one of the things too is that, so in addition to the wheel, Bonnie, there was also, they categorized things, so you could immediately go to a particular category.
Yeah, let me figure out what that is.
It's really, if you spent time with it, what they have, I mean, it's amazing for those of us who were trying to get COPAP to search on. And this is like remarkable, but in the ease of being able to, there's a ton there, but you could, if I was mostly interested in cardiac, I could immediately go to that.
Yeah.
Go to various, if it was personality, go to cognitive, however they, mental.
I don't know how they put that.
You know, those types of conditions. So it is extraordinarily impressive in the way that these are presented and how easy it is to maneuver that around.
I can't, there's so much data in here, I can't remember where it is.
It seems like it'd be a nice app to have even without the genetic testing results.
Well,
the database of, diseases.
The chromosomes, I love the, I'm like, oh, if nothing else, I can see what's on what chromosome and very easily. This is kind of cool. These kinds of data that show, and I know what I wanted to show you. This is what I wanted to show. When we go back here and we look at, oh, come on. And we look at, it would help if I could spell. There. Okay. I didn't show you this. The bottom here is the reference genome, and this is mine. And so it's mapped, so of course the question is, so who's the reference genome? Apparently it's 22 people from Connecticut. I don't know. It really is. They took a bunch of people from a small town, okay, and threw them together. And again, another limitation of the technology is you're assuming that if you get enough people together and you use their genome, that you've weeded out what are abnormals, but you may not have. So, it does have some limitations. A lot of limitations. Yeah, anybody? Well, I'm going to throw Betsy's slides up. She can tell you how much this costs and what they can do and what they can't do.
I just thought some people might have some very practical questions. These are directly off the website, so you can just Google Illumina. But this isn't the only platform that they offer for next-gen sequencing. So this is the one that's called the predictive platform. So it's for healthy adults who want to know about their genome and about passing on genes. And basically, it's based on single gene disorders. So basically 1,600, these are the three, that was it. So the one that Bonnie had done was the True Genome Predisposition Screen. It's not going to give you multifactorial types of disorders. There's also certain things that next-gen sequencing at this point in time doesn't do well. So any of the trinucleotide repeats, the spinocerebellar ataxia, the Huntington's, that are not seen by this. So, however, the one that really is coming into use quite a bit is the first one, which is the undiagnosed disease test. So this is when you have an affected patient, most frequently in pediatrics, but also in some adult situations where you're thinking about this. Then there's a different platform with many more genes, and actually to the point where you also, because of the issue of variants of unknown significance, that you may have to go back and get what they call the trio. So you have the patient plus the two parents that also need to be tested. And then there's the True Genome technical sequence data. So you can just basically order all for your genome to be totally sequenced, and they will give you back the data, and then it's up to you to find your own custom private bioinformatician to do the analysis. So, and Bonnie mentioned that they would give you the drive with the data. They will do that it doesn't come with, for example, true genome predisposition screen, but for an additional $500, they will give it to you. This just shows you, because I thought some people might have some questions about what the actual cost is. Again, these numbers differ depending on if you're an institution sending out a lot of samples to them or what kind of agreement. But if you were just somebody like me looking on the website and going to see how much it is, in the undiagnosed disease test, it's roughly $9,500. It goes up to $17,500 when you include the parents in that. And then there's a reflex test, which also is $9,500. The predisposition screen that Bonnie had is $9,500. And that's for the regular turnaround times. You can see that if you go for a rapid turnaround time, that then there's an additional cost of roughly $2,000. And what are the standard turnaround times for these? You can see what they are. So anywhere from essentially a month and a half or so to 90 days. So that's just some of the practical, but I think the most important thing is it's here. It's now, and you can get it on your iPad. So I think that we need to be prepared in the labs as well. People will say to me, what's the benefit of doing an array? So there are limitations of NGS right now, again, in terms of it can see small deletions, very small duplications. It can't see large copy number. It can't see trinucleotide repeats. You do need somebody to help you navigate what is being ordered, unless, again, you know, you're doing it simply for personal information. So I want to thank Bonnie very much for being willing to share.